Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shares with Kevin, where we add value to people's lives, happening every other day on ebusradio.com at around 12 o'clock. For our lunchtime marketing segment, our very own resident genius, marketing and communication expert, Craig Page-Lee. Craig, how are you doing?
I'm well, Kevin. Thanks. And you?
Good. Thanks for making some more time for us this week. I know that last week we had a nice discussion around brand and building efforts, and it made me really question some of the things I was doing and looking at how I was doing, but also recognizing the word of mouth kind of conversations I have had with some of my clients where they are. There's enough value being added, so it's really lending itself to what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
Oh, that's awesome. You've obviously got some of the key fundamentals of brand building right in that regard, then, Kevin. Because if clients are referring you, you're definitely going in the right direction. But what's really great about that, and referencing last week's session where I spoke about Simon Sinek's golden circle model, is I can clearly see that your executive leadership development coaching service you provide is obviously meeting a distinct client need. Your how, the way you're structuring and delivering your coaching is obviously allowing you to stand out from the competition, which is really, really great. But most importantly, your why. The reason that you're passionate about what you do and why your brand exists is obviously resonating with many who experience your brand daily, Kevin. And to this point, just for the listeners, I know that you've established your leadership coaching business to add value to people's lives, and obviously you're doing just that on the basis of the traction that you're getting.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I appreciate it. For those who did not get a chance to listen to our conversation last week, what are some of those key points that we can take away from the basics of brand building?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. The strategy new media .com blog article that we referenced last week had a couple of really nice, clear, simple tips. So let me jump into those as a reflection on the end of last week's show. So branding promotes recognition. Some of this is obvious, but there's some wonderful interlays between the points that we cover here. So people tend to buy brands to do business with companies that they're familiar with. So if your branding is consistent and easy to recognize, it can definitely help people feel more at ease when purchasing your product or service. Your brand helps you set yourself apart from the competition. It's critical to stand out from the crowd, as we would know. So you're no longer competing on a local stage. Your brand organization now competes globally. So we really need to be able to, take that standouts to another level entirely as well. Your brand tells people about your DNA. So your full brand experience, from the visual elements, the logo, to the way that your phones are answered. If you're a customer call center, retail organization, it tells consumers about the kind of brand that you actually are. It also provides great motivation and direction for your staff. The point that we've picked up on quite a bit, and a vitally important point, because the clear brand strategy provides a clarity for your staff, and it enables them to be successful. It also tells them how to act, how to win, and how to meet their organizational goals. A strong brand generates referrals, obviously, but you got to keep working at it to ensure that's a reality. So people love to tell others about the brands they like they have with you. People wear brands, they eat brands, they listen to brands, and they're constantly telling each other about the brands they love. So a strong brand website strategy like backlinks is critical to generating referral and viral traffic, because it'll pick it up and drive more information or more users to your site. So a strong brand also helps customers know what to expect. And this is probably one of the most important points here. A brand that's consistent and clear puts the customers at ease, because they know exactly what to expect each and every single time they experience the brand. And any deviation from that, Kevin, is a trigger of concern to question if the brand has moved off center or if the brand's resting on its laurels. So it's important both internally and externally. Your brand represents you and your promise to customers. It's important here to remember that your brand represents you. You are the brand, and as I mentioned earlier as well, the staff of the brand and all your marketing materials of the brand. So it's just not just the label on the pack. It's also about what they say about you, and what they say about you is definitely going to be challenged as to whether you're delivering against your promise. Your brand also helps you create a clear, and it helps you create a clearly focused position. It's easy to stray around and wander from one idea to the next with nothing to guide you. And it doesn't take long to move from the center point of what the actual original goals are and what the brand stands for. So a clear brand strategy definitely helps you stay focused on your mission and vision as an organization. Your brand helps you connect with customers emotionally. Again, also an incredibly important point here. So good brands connect with people at an emotional level. They feel good when they buy the brand, and purchasing is an emotional experience that allows you to have, that enables a strong brand making people feel good on an emotional level where they engage with that company. And lastly, on this point, a strong brand provides your business with value. So strong branding will provide value to the organization way beyond the physical assets. And I want to cite an example here, Kevin. So just think about the likes of Coca-Cola, Ford, Apple, the great brand we all aspire to. So the question here is, are these companies really worth all the equipment and infrastructure and assets they have? No, they're worth way beyond, because actually they've created value far in excess of their physical assets. And that's really what a strong brand is able to do. So yeah, that's a wrap on the points from last week.
Yeah, I mean, to that point you just mentioned now, Craig, I think, when I'm doing what I do, I actually have that as a measurement to what I live by when I'm, engaging with any client or doing any kind of work. I actually ask myself, is this adding value or is it not adding value? And if it's an immediate yes, I kind of go, okay, cool, yes, this is adding value. If it's an immediate no or an immediate maybe, I kind of like, okay, cool, not adding value like it should, steer away from it. Because I know inevitably, if it doesn't simply add value, somewhere down the line, I'm going to lose connection.
Yes, really, really great point.
So what are we going to be chatting about today, Craig?
So Kevin, just to continue the conversation on brand building, but I really want to focus sort of on two key concepts that I believe are essential in gaining customer attention and inevitably leading to brand purchase. And it's a nice build on the foundational layer we addressed last week. So the first concept is that of brand authenticity and gravitational pull. So in other words, how the hell to attract customers to a brand. And the second concept is really trying to unpack some complexity around branding, and that is around the topic of brand architecture. And that's a way to establish if a brand in essence has if a company, I should say, has too many brands, which of those brands are needed, what is the role that each of them play in the bigger picture, particularly in multi-brand portfolios. And as you say, having already established your brand, the two concepts actually have a codependency on each other, Kevin. Fortunately for you, you're a solo brand, but there are definitely many brands out there where there's so many brands in a portfolio that there's some beautiful principles that we're going to touch on to help navigate through that mess.
I must admit that's quite intriguing to know about more that organizations determine whether they have too many brands or not, because sometimes it's needed, and how do you navigate it all over this umbrella and kind of go, yeah, we still mothership kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question, because there clearly are some brands that have too many, and I'm just going to jump right into one of those famous brands of the world that took an absolute beating at one stage and had to work long and hard to find its relevance again. Nokia had a brand for just about every single sub-segment of the population across the world, for every particular usage expectation, and they just had the spectrum of too many brands, and they lost relevance in many of those areas, and the business failed on the back of that to a large degree, and they had to really pull back and cull a substantial amount of the product offering they had at a particular point. So yeah, this particular conversation addresses some of that. So going back to the first point we mentioned here, though, on the concept of brand authenticity, let's open a conversation by quoting two direct paragraphs from a really interesting article I found on entrepreneur.com, Kevin. So titled To build a powerful brand, begin on the inside and move out. The article was published on the 7th of this month, so really current, fresh thinking, published by Kevin Roddy. He's the Entrepreneur Leadership Network contributor and a creative director writer at Greater Est, which is an interesting creative resource that develops multidimensional ideas and very much focused on storytelling for brands. So the paragraphs read as follows. For decades, businesses have looked outside of themselves for their beliefs. They've spent incredible amounts of time and money paying so-called experts to ask consumers what their brand should stand for. And once they uncover that appealing space, they use loads of money and fancy marketing to try and get consumers to buy into it. However, that's a fake authenticity, and consumers are rejecting it. They reject it in business the very same way they reject it in politicians, in media, in religion, and in many other institutions. On the other hand, when consumers see a business with an authentic brand belief they share, that business reflects something that they believe in, they become loyalists, even evangelists. And that's because consumers buy into belief, not pandering.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have mentioned a couple of times over the last few weeks to that point, Kevin, is that authenticity does matter. Absolutely nobody can argue that. And as a matter of fact, for those that it matters, and to quote Kenny Roddy again, authenticity lives firmly at a brand's core. People look to why a brand does what it does and the reason its products and services exist. So if a brand has a core belief that those people believe in and align with, they're definitely more likely to become loyalists. And obviously when you're a loyalist, you're going to see the brand sales drive upwards. So with that in mind, it goes out without saying that every brand, Kevin, every brand today needs to uncover, unpack, rediscover its core belief. And they genuinely need to look inside, not just outside to find. It goes without saying, Kevin, that every brand must uncover or rediscover its core belief, and they need to look inside, not outside, to find what it is and where it is. So what I like about the article is it talks about the fact that brands often confuse their principles with their practices. And this is clear. Messages are often seen as the principles, but actually they're just the practices, and they're not fluid. There's a distinct difference. Principles are the foundation of the brand belief, and they are not interchangeable with the practices. So message is practice. Message comes on the basis of a foundation of strong principles, and when that's in play, you can then start playing around with your different messaging and practices. Okay. Yeah. So another point that I covered a few times, Kevin, is the importance of embedding that culture of belief into the organization, because organizational actions bring the brand's definition and its attributes to life. And when the people behind the brand start behaving in a particular way that reflects what the brand is and what it does and why it matters, they're obviously going to connect more with the brand and what it stands for. So, closing off on that point, to quote Kevin Roddy again, it goes beyond marketing. This is defining and installing the core principles of what your brand stands for. This is the mission and why it gets out of bed in the morning. Because it's not only consumers that want to buy into what a brand believes, so do employees, stakeholders, and stockholders. In fact, they must, because the behavior of a brand's internal culture is the brand itself.
Yeah, Greg, you're absolutely right. I do recall that consumers gravitate to brands where the behaviors of the organizations clearly reflect who the brand is, what it does, and why it matters. So while this demonstrates a key need for the brands to behave in an authentic and believable way, what do brands need to do to attain the gravitational pull that you mentioned earlier?
That's...
You also mentioned that organizational behavior, and I'm kind of going, that's a big thing in my, for what I do. So.
Yeah. It's absolutely the spectrum that you play in. So gravitational pull is vitally important in the sphere of organizational behavior as well. So yes, authenticity and gravitational pull, I did use them in the same sentence. Therefore, there may be an expectation they actually are two concepts that are similar in meaning. However, they actually vary to a large degree, when brand is top of mind and noticed by consumers when they make a purchase decision. So let me expand on that, because I need to give you the differential in that regard. However, in doing so, you'll see that there is a lovely thread that does link them. So to expand on the topic, let me reference the article by Stephen Firth, published on brandingmag.com on the 11th of May this year. And again, there's some amazing current relevant stuff that I'm finding out there. So just to let listeners know, Stephen Firth is a senior partner at Vivaldi, which is a global consulting and brand transformation firm, and a company that I'm incredibly aware of and in awe of, and a really, really great business. So his article is titled "How Brands Can Create Gravitational Pull, Attracting Customers into Their Orbit." So he opens his article by referencing another really important name, Les Binet. He's head of effectiveness at Adam and Eve DDB, and I don't know if you know Adam and Eve or of Adam and Eve DDB at all, Kevin. They're a leading global communications agency based in London. Phenomenal business, really, really is. And for our listeners, Stephen Firth is recognized as an expert in econometrics, and he's won more effectiveness awards than anyone else in the UK. In 2014, Les Binet was awarded the President's Medal by the IPA, the Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, which is the highest accolade honor bestowed on any industry member in recognition of their achievements. So looking at Stephen and at Les Binet, bringing the thinking together, we're definitely in good company of intelligence here. So with the intros and accolades out of the way, we learned that Les Binet has uncovered a methodology that enables us to better understand the impact of gravitational pull, Kevin. And gravitational pull is actually brand strength. And it's a correlation to both the share of search and market share. And his focus is really been laid around the buildup of memory structures and the bias consumer behavior has into the future. And it's something that you and I speak about quite a bit. So I thought this would appeal to you.
Yes.
So his theory of gravitational pull is defined as follows. Principally, where a brand acts, communicates, and creates experiences in such a way that people more deeply connect with its mission, vision, and values. A deep affinity within the brand is created and a gravitational pull occurs. Quite literally, a force of attraction. This results in deeper loyalty and advocacy, the holy grail of marketing. This emotional engagement may have been previously difficult to quantify and often relied on focus groups. However, the modern data-driven nature of digital communications means we can start to learn how to track this phenomena in real time and even predict its impact on the bottom line. Last week we spoke about NLP and all of the cognitive biases that come to bear in that regard, and this really talks directly into that space. So his research demonstrates that the share of online search is a key indicator of brand power, both in long-term and short-term spectrum, and that long-term predictors can also act as an early warning system for brand. His research also revealed a key financial correlation between having an effective gravitational pull and market share, which was really great to see. So three key principles came out of the reading in creating gravitational pull for brands, which helps consumers connect with brands on an emotional level, which in turn obviously increases loyalty and at the end of the day, brand advocacy. So let me expand on those three principles quickly, Kevin. The first one is gravitational pull starts deep within an organization and brand. So the ability to create that invisible magnet drawing people into a brand is often the whole reason for being. The mission, the vision, the values all need consideration as these lay the foundational pillars for that pull. And the DNA of the brand needs to be true and clear. If it is unclear in purpose or hasn't developed its true foundation to its building, consumers definitely won't have that initial pull into it. Point two here is connecting brand strategy seamlessly to all consumer interactions. And this point you and I have picked up on multiple occasions in terms of that consistency through the entire consumer journey. So if a brand is the face of your business strategy, it needs to be fully represented in all of your customer interactions. All too often, there are fractures in this process, and it takes time to interpret and translate the brand strategy. Some get it wrong by sharing the same media post across multiple channels without even thinking about the appropriate activation and message tonality and change for each of those particular channels. And marketers can obviously get very tactical very quickly, and they don't align closely enough to the brand strategy, and therefore, it's this whitewash and wallpaper. So they need to consider their long-term marketing strategy to communicate the brand strategy effectively. And the last point or principle that he talks about is the shorten the distance between you and your consumer. So the obvious thing here is that getting closer to your consumers would be an obvious statement. And many brands say they do this. However, not many brands really know how to build that fluid, organic relationship that pulls customers into the brand. And even more challenging is actually how to activate and empower them to be advocates and share the mission, vision, and values more broadly. So when you shorten the distance between the brand and your most valuable consumers, you're not only building greater loyalty and advocacy, but you're definitely increasing the chance to harness more meaningful insights, which in turn you can use to be more effective in your communication and change those messages across the different channels and on and on and on.
Yeah, Craig, I mean, like I just look at these three key points, from gravitational pull to your seamless brand strategy, and the distance between you and your customer. Like those 3 points, if you live by them almost as a rule, it really starts solidifying exactly how you're going about your actual brand strategy. I'm so gonna use those 3 points.
You know what I like about that as well is if one applies these principles to yourself, your persona, and I spoke about last week the why, what, how, Simon Sinek model as well, is start thinking about what's your proximity to your relationship with those around you, family, colleagues, friends. What is your gravitational pull? The various principles around, what are your interactions with those people in your life? What is your brand stand for? Who are you as an individual as well? All of those things come to bear. So branding, obviously there's the whole advent of personal branding, and you can most definitely start applying the principles to that. But you as an individual, if you really think deeply into a lot of these constructs, you can actually use the theories to ensure that you are delivering the value that you intend to deliver as a human being in your day-to-day existence as well.
Yeah, and it comes back to me, for me, it comes back to that very long conversation, like we had it like very long time ago already, is that like, how are you connecting as a consumer? How do you connect to this person? How do you connect as a human to the people you're speaking to? So, but I mean, on that note, Craig, so gravitational starts with the organization, and that we hear that the need to manage the entire customer experience journey again. What examples can you share to demonstrate these 3 key principles of gravitational pull?
Yeah, what was really great is there were a couple of examples that were included in the article, but I've just taken one brand from each of the 3 principles, and they're brands we all know. So that's really why I wanted to pick up on those. So let's look at the first principle being that gravitational pull starts deep within the organization and brand. And what we learn here that there's no better gravitational pull example on the planet as far as I'm concerned than the Nike brand, hence the choice of that one. So what many of us do know, Kevin, that the Nike brand is actually associated with professional performance. But not only that, is it also bridges the gap to connect with culture. And that's a really important aspect. And the examples that we've got will just resonate so to demonstrate that professional performance cultural magnetization. So Nike's mission is that if you have a body, you're an athlete. The body like mine, probably a bad athlete. So this is the organizing principle of the brand, and it threads through everything that the brand does, through all of the activations, etc., to the point that when you wear Nike, you're associating with and saying something much deeper about yourself and your own values. And an important milestone for the brand, particularly culturally, was when Nike hired Colin Kaepernick for their 30th anniversary Just Do It campaign. And for those who don't know, importantly, Colin Kaepernick's a former NFL quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers and now a very powerful American rights activist who made the kneeling protest against police brutality before every single NFL game. And you're probably well aware that he started on his own, and there was a groundswell that came on the back of that, which was really incredible. So Kaepernick demonstrated what the brand believed in and stood for. So while his action was absolutely hated by many NFL fans, Kevin, many more loved it. And they actually became predisposed to the brand and its shared values over time, to the point that particular gamble paid off for Nike as their stock price increased and grew by over 10% earnings for that particular quarter in which that campaign was launched. So, that's putting your money where your mouth is and what you stand for. Phenomenal example. So, yeah. Moving to principle 2, which states that we must connect brand strategy seamlessly to all customer interactions, the obvious brand to stand out here is Apple. As the most valuable brand, it sells more smartphones at a higher margin than any other OEM, primarily on the back of the power of the brand and the consistent brand experience, which is core to the Apple brand, Kevin. So the advertising focuses on showing, not telling, and this is what I do love about the brand. For example, the shot in the iPhone ads, the emotional connection between pulling customers into the brand is realized through the in-store experience, where, for example, the Genius Bar allows customers to feel empowered. The reshaping of the in-store experience also emphasizes their disruptive spirit. And the brand journey continues with the unpacking experience at home, the queues around city blocks for releases of new announcements. They're not an accident. They're all carefully planned and part of the culture and culture that comes with that brand. And Kevin, one of the things that they got so right is they allowed, particularly every single major Apple store around the world have got these benches of machines that are connected to the internet, that people can come into the store, visitors to cities, and they can actually spend a few minutes engaging and immersing themselves in these new products, but using that opportunity to send their emails, their Hotmails, the Gmails, the updates, the social media stuff. So they come in and check in at Apple. There's a beautiful immersive experience with these great products, but they're actually using it to deliver some of their personal need, particularly when traveling around different cities in the world. And I've done that, and it's an incredible experience. And I look forward to each time I travel to be able to go into an Apple store and just play around on the latest tech for a while and send my 5 or 10 mails that I need to, or social media posts, and just be in that brand. So, shorten. That leads to the next point, where that seamless experience takes you to principle 3, where you need to shorten the gap between you and your customers. And the brand that's getting it right is actually Lego. Another phenomenal brand. They've topped the super brands ranking as the UK's strongest consumer brand for 2 years in a row now, and they connect the brand seamlessly into their customers' lives, which in turn enables them to become really big brand advocates. And what they've done is, they've gone back to when 2 teenagers started the Lego YouTube channel Beyond a Brick, which featured builders from around the world showcasing their amazing Lego creations and actually showing them how to get past some of the complexities and those things as well. And that channel grew. It's got over 880,000 subscribers, Kevin, with over 300 million views. Sure. Lego, the brand. And it was due to Lego customers joining up, contributing, and becoming fully immersed in the brand and across the age spectrum. So, yeah, really what's great there is that gravitational pull as a theory, it must be implemented and it must be used as that beautiful overarching strategy for all of the brands in order to create deeper and more meaningful, profitable connections with consumers. Gravitational pull's direct effects can now be quantified in a tangible way with share of search, as we mentioned earlier, key indicator, which is predicting future market share opportunity. And in order to succeed, brands must therefore make sure the gravitational pull starts deep within the organization and connects through all of the interactions. And they also then therefore need to shorten the distance between the brand and the consumers.
Great. So I guess it's easy to demonstrate these kinds of points when you're speaking or referencing such iconic global brands.
Yeah, Absolutely, Kevin. What, and for me, the thing I appreciate about Lego is it's been able to transcend age groups and not just the younger target audience, but oldies like myself. And the reason I like Lego as much as I do is their two-scale automotive vehicle collection. And whilst not cheap, incredible product where you actually get to building working componentry in the engines and the springs work in the cars. And my favorite is the new Land Rover Defender 90 vehicle range. Phenomenal. And it's a substantial piece when it's built, and you just look at this brand and connect dearly with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've even seen there's a series. It's not it's an international series, and it's something called like Lego World or something, where people compete with the best Lego design, and like it's a complete game show. It's ridiculous.
Wow! I'm definitely going to go and look out for that.
Yeah, so you mentioned that brand architecture is an important consideration in the success of brand-led businesses. What can you share with us in this regard?
Yeah, Kevin, to achieve everything we've spoken about, one really does need to understand the role brand plays in the bigger picture. So yeah. Brand architecture is something that many brands have overlooked or actually just not necessarily understood the importance of, especially when it comes to their consumer-facing brands. So let's start off by clarifying firstly what brand architecture is. And the key statement here is that brand architecture should be designed with an external audience in mind, and that sub-brands should be developed to meet the needs of the different market segments. And it shouldn't be designed to reflect the entities of the internal organization structure. Okay. Brand architecture also includes an integrated system of names, symbols, colors, visual vocabulary, informed directly by the consumer's thought process. And externally, brand architecture is about managing perceptions and helping customers and stakeholders navigate through the multifaceted organization. So referencing the brandmastery.com, brandmasteryacademy.com blog again, definition here is that brand architecture is an organizational brand strategy used to organize a portfolio of brands, services, or entities known as sub-brands. Whether these sub-brands are segmented into individual entities or not, brand architecture clearly distinguishes the difference from simple product naming right up to the segregated market targeting, positioning, and messaging. So just to expand on that, Kevin, I looked at a couple of articles I came across, and there's a really wonderful, simple guide published by Derek Dale on brandstrategyinsider.com that's titled Branding Strategy, a Branding Architecture Strategy Guide. And he opens with the following. Brand architecture is defined as the logic, strategic, and relational structure for your brand, or put it in another way, it's the entity's family tree of brands, sub-brands, and named products. And what this means is that it further refers to two other terms that are used quite loosely in organization of brand architecture. The first being a branded house, which implies the most or all of the products or services that exist and are provided by that organization primarily bear the organization's brand name. For example, FedEx, Google, Coca-Cola, Virgin, etc. The second being the house of brands, which implies that the organization's products and services carry a wide variety of brand names as opposed to the organization's name. And the examples here would be clear for you is in Unilever, there's a spectrum of brands. In Procter & Gamble, there's a spectrum of brands. In General Motors, there's a multitude of brand names and product names as well.
Yeah, so like different car brands that we could use as reference?
Yes, so if one looks at BMW would be a branded house because you've got BMW 3 Series, 5 Series, 7 Series, all of them on the back of the clear, distinct BMW brand. Yeah. Bentley would be the same. When you get into a Toyota space, you get Toyota and Lexus. So you're starting to see a bit of a difference coming through in that. So there's two quite strong brands that live. One could go that's almost a bit of a hybrid, but the Toyota is Toyota, Lexus is Lexus, but they're owned by the same group. So at a group level, Toyota Motor Corporation has these particular brands at play there. And then when you get into the Ford space, you'd have a Fiesta, you'd have a Ranger, you'd have a whole plethora of other brands behind it that would be a house of brands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, it's important to note that sometimes a number of the brands and name products in those organizations, Kevin, there's a complexity in managing those. Sometimes they just are due to mergers and acquisitions, and it's a byproduct of where the business is at that particular point in its life cycle as well. And as it continues to evolve and innovate, often new brands, new products and services are developed, and names are just thrown out there against those particular products and services. So in essence, there are just too many differentiated products in those portfolios, and brand architecture is an attempt to bring it back to some kind of structure and familiarity, or at least simplicity, as opposed to the high cost of managing a very diverse multi-brand portfolio. So new products and services are often named as they're created, as I mentioned, and it's a throwaway thing. No naming standards, no view to understand what that particular name is in the long-term branding strategy and what the business why is. So there are obviously very clear reasons to that for the different brands and sub-brands in their product offering. But I'm going to pick up on 4 points as to what we can learn from Branding Architecture Strategy Guide again. So here's some of the reasons. If there are channel conflicts issues, especially if key customers who resell their end product consumers want to offer something different from their competitors, it's important to consolidate the single-minded brand approach. If the same or very similar products are sold at different price points, there's a lot of complexity that comes in there, and separate brands or sub-brands can create more distance between the offerings. So it's important to understand if you're going to confuse your market, but you've got quite clear advantages and benefits in each of the brands, introduce a sub-brand opportunity there. If one set of products is upscale or premium, the others are standard or value, there's a nice opportunity to introduce a brand architecture there as well, and develop some sub-brands if need be. And finally, if one brand appeals to a very different market segment with totally different needs from the other brand, making the message very different, you'd see the need for brand architecture coming to bear in that regard as well. So yeah, you might have thought that understanding the difference between branded house and a house of brands was complex. Try adding endorsed branding into the mix, Kevin.
Yeah, like because it's slightly confusing now, because I'm just thinking, if you do have sort of parts of your brand that do speak to different segments, and you kind of go, okay, so but how do you get back to the house brand, right? Like, do you follow certain rules and guidelines, or I don't like it's?
Yeah. So let me just get sort of 4 key principles. A branded house really is where all the products are organized around the parent brand umbrella, whereas a house of brands, or at least sub-brands, is where the brands augment the parent brand. They connected to the parent brand. So the branded house products organized around the parent brand umbrella. The sub-brands are brands that augment and are connected to the parent umbrella. Yeah. Whereas endorsed brands, as I've just mentioned, are brands and products endorsed by the parent brand. And then you get a house of brands, which are the parent company with standalone disconnected brands that I mentioned earlier on. So the 3 sort of connected principles is the branded house, the sub-brands, and the endorsed brands. All of those have a reference back to a parent brand. The brands that hang out on a fringe with a parent company behind it is the house of brands.
Yeah.
Okay. So understanding that it's not necessarily as complex as it sounds, because endorsed branding is a brand architecture structural strategy that consists of distinctly different products or services that are positioned independently from the parent brand, which is in essence known as the endorser brand. And although these sub-brands are obviously distinctly different, they each retain an association with the endorser or parent brand, whether through visual reference, the brand mark, and endorsed statements. And the brand architecture strategy leverages the brand equity and reputation of the brand, while a parent brand, I should say, while enjoying their independence in terms of positioning, visual identity, and personality at messaging. In other words, the endorsed brand is the best of both worlds. They've got some power to leverage at the end of the day. So to approach it from a different angle, linking or aligning the different brands to each other doesn't necessarily pose a danger to each of the respective brands, especially if one is endorsed by the others. So one brand's association could detract from the others, which is not necessarily beneficial to the brands on the opposite end of the conversation.
Yeah.
So to close off on the role of brand architecture and the endorser brands, Kevin, I just want to recap with a few simple truths and rule of thumbs, again, as referenced in the brand architecture strategy guide. So the simpler the system, the better, with ideally no more than 2 levels of hierarchy. The system should be flexible enough to address all current and anticipated branding situations, and that's why it talks about understanding the why of the business and where its trajectory is. The dominant brand should always be one that you most intend to build over time. Sub-brands should be created sparingly, however, they can be built to make the main or parent brand more relevant to new customer segments. When an existing brand can be used, new brands should not be created. Careful thought should be put into what level taglines are used. And many organizations have evolved to sub-brand systems with some provision for flexibility and variation. More and more organizations are trying to build and leverage their corporate parent brand and organization brands as a way to save money when marketing their products and services. And only brands that are highly differentiated will be maintained for at least several years. These will be supported by significant marketing investments and resources over time. And brand architecture should be designed with external audiences in mind and should not be designed to reflect the legal entities or internal organizational structures. That is just an absolute confusion for consumers. And lastly, their sub-brands should be developed to meet the needs of the different market segments, which again requires a deep understanding of those particular segments, because those brands also then need to talk into meeting the needs of the subset audiences there.
Greg, so you mentioned that brand architecture has increased relevance in the digital age. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a long, deep conversation. So I read a lot on this, and it's an ongoing conversation that we could spend an entire show on. But what I really want to do is look at this thing called the expectation of immediacy and instantaneousness in the digital world that we all live in today. And this definitely has the most impact on traditional theory of brand architecture. And there's a couple of very salient points that just help land this concept. So referencing a 2-part series that I came across on Branding Mag, and a really great read titled New Brand Architecture for a Fragmented Digital Purpose-Fueled World, published by Neil Park at the end of 2021. I've just summarized the topic read as follows. And there are 3 secular shifts that have changed things enough that we need a brand new theory for brand architecture. So the first is the explosion of brands. And in an era awash with brands, it takes strenuous effort to get noticed, especially when media channels are also exploding in number and marketers have seconds to land a message. As he states, in such an environment, fragmented brand architectures risk letting their many separate components drown alone. And the logic shifts firmly from monolithic or minimum viable brand approaches. So it's really about just trying to get back through the clutter to a center of focus. The second is the dramatic shift or direct digital relationship between brands and people at the expense of true relationships mediated by retail in B2C or attentive sales forces in the B2B environment. And this means that brand architecture needs to incorporate navigability as a consideration. Digital is where we're born with mobiles in our hands these days. And what is a brand architecture response to brand experience in that particular space? And they need to help people understand and engage with the company's offerings as a whole. And that's a really great statement for me, because we need to understand the navigability aspect in brand consideration in the brand architecture strategy phase. And the third shift there is to push towards purpose. A really important piece here is that people are demanding far more from brands today than just the functional benefits and managerial emphasis on commercial issues and success. This means that brand architecture needs to showcase the purpose-driven stories, Kevin, how they're connecting all the offerings under that visible and transparent mission. And again, 100% aligned with our previous conversations on the topic of purpose. And, interesting to think that brand architecture is an enabler to demonstrate the purpose structure as well. So in any new brand architecture theory, it needs to incorporate navigability as a consideration, Kevin, to allow people to understand, engage with the company's offering as a whole. And as a general rule, this means often debranding, losing the clutter, treating creatively branded elements at the product level with suspicion, and looking to deploy just one or two or a few brand umbrellas with a clearly named signpost to products under them. Just get rid of the layers of complexity and confusion.
Craig, I think that's a whole another show. We could actually do a whole show on debranding, right?
Yeah, I think, in fact, yes. In about 2 shows, let's do that. It's really important, and that again will just show this incredible, powerful linkage to digital. It really, really is. Even to the point that there's a wonderful conversation I have with industry friends and folk often is, what does the brand CI guideline of the modern world look like? Because the digital brand experience, in a way, is unorchestrated. It's undefined in so many instances. And how do you take the rigidity of brand controls from a very one-dimensional print application, page application, website page application into a space where a brand is dynamic? It flashes, it pops up, it disappears, it's static 1 minute, it's fluid the next minute. What do brand controls need to do to take control of all of the expectations and usage instances for a brand in the digital world? So Neil Parker provides a perfect example for the travel industry, Kevin, where he notes the following. Air travel is an excellent metaphor for this. If we can summon that distinct experience to mind, billions of people worldwide have navigated huge distances without error all around the world by using a simple architecture: airline, airport, terminal, gate, flight, group, seat. And within that structure, there are only 2 brands that we really remember. There's the airline and there's the airport. Simple as that. So when you debrand, distill, and simplify to that level and create the brand architecture thinking around that's the success of simplicity that really we should be aiming at. So doing this job well requires a fundamental shift away from thinking about brand architecture as an analytical framework in which all the points of the spectrum may be viable options, but moving towards a more ideological stance where branding architecture is the practice of building even simpler, more human, and more mission-driven brand systems, Kevin.
Yeah, amazing. So as I said on the outset, great. It's really great that we're covering brand fundamentals. But I didn't realize the depth that one needs to go into building a brand, and most importantly, keeping it relevant and fit for purpose in meeting consumers' needs.
Yeah, purpose, absolutely. And as I mentioned last week, it's brand building is not a 5-minute exercise, Kevin, nor is it something that you want to cut corners on, because organizations really need to demonstrate their what, how, and why to remain relevant, and applying these principles with other bespoke or best-in-class industry strategic processes will help eliminate all of those unnecessary layers, Kevin, and just get their business to focus on the core brands that actually have salience with customers and meet their real societal need. That's really where it needs to be, and brand architecture helps achieve that.
Yeah, it's definitely not a 5-minute exercise. I'm happy to listen to this whole podcast again just to reiterate all of the information that you shared. But I mean, in today's session, what are the key points and tips that the listeners can take away from today? Yeah,
just very simple. 7 simple points. Determine what the overarching branding approach is. Is it a master brand, sub-brand, endorsed brand, standalone brand, or a mix of those? Really get to understand how many levels of branding should exist in the organization and what type of brands do exist at each level, and if they're actually necessary at all. And how brands differ at each of those levels relates and how they relate to each other again, even if they relate to each other at all. And then define your decision rules for creating new brands. Don't create them for the sake of creating them. Really get to learn which brands' identities are dominant and which ones are recessive, and get to understand if recessive brands are playing an important role in your business or not, because every brand takes money and investment, and there may be an opportunity to eliminate recessive brands and put more focus into those dominant brands. And define what type of names an organization uses. Are they associative, descriptive, or generic descriptors, and in which circumstances those names apply? And when you've got your decision rules in place, you can start getting clarity on which of those descriptors to use. And then finally, which brands are featured in each and every single media vehicle, situation, and circumstance. What is the brand on a business card, on stationery, on a product catalog, on a website, on a shipping box, on a vehicle, on signage outside the building, on employee uniforms? All of those aspects come into allowing you to question what that brand strategy is, what the brand architecture looks like, and what the brand needs to say in its particular environment of application.
Amazing. Thank you, Craig. Guys, if you have tuned in today and you are listening to our marketing segment, what we generally do on the show is we follow a nice pathway, and Craig ties up all the loose ends for us. So go and check it out on ebizradio.com and look out for all the marketing segments, because they all speak to each other all the time. Craig, I think it's a fantastic how you tie these. I mean, I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. But I'm like, what do we have lined up for next week's podcast?
Yeah, so I'm going to take the last two sessions and actually thread them together and have a look at a few successful South African brands and learn how they've evolved their brands in line with these particular points, and see how they've positioned their brands to stay ahead of the competition. Try and find some that have actually got rid of recessive brands, put new focus in place, some that have introduced new brands and created an entirely different brand architecture, to some that have actually just become incredibly singular and honed it down to become very monolithic and single-minded in their focus.
Yeah, fantastic. Craig, thank you. We've literally run out of time. But guys, catch us every Thursday around 12 o'clock on ebizradio.com. Craig, thank you for your time, and I'll see you next week.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Kevin. Look forward to it.
Cheers for now.
Bye.